and I'm joined live from New York by Mark Meirowitz, political analyst. Mark, I want to thank you so much for joining us today again here on A News. Another momentous occasion you join us. The Turkish presidency has just been extended for Turkish President Recep Tayyip Erdogan. He's won the rerun election today with 52.16% of the votes. What is your first reaction to that?
Well, I mean, I was not surprised. I really thought he was going to win. I thought that it's a real affirmation on the part of the Turkish people for the leadership of President Erdogan. And we can analyze a little bit if we want to talk about some of the dynamics here. But a number of factors fell into place for President Erdogan after the first round, right, that I think made this an inevitable result. That's what I think.
And of course, there were great differences between the general election campaigning and preparations for that general election on the 14th of May, two weeks ago, and in the last fortnight. You noticed you just mentioned a particular difference between the two campaigns. What did you find?
Well, I think that the influence of Sinan Oğan was very significant in terms of those 5.2%, even though they were divided somewhat with Umut Özdağ. And I think that where the opposition really lost a lot of its steam in the first election because it did not win a majority of the parliament. That was a very, very significant loss. And frankly, notwithstanding all the commentators around the world, I thought President Erdogan won the first round. I mean, he didn't get over 50%, but he won the first round by 5 points. I mean, so many of the commentators in the West and in America said that, well, it fell short, but the predictions were unclear in terms of whether President Erdogan would even achieve that level, and he got 49.5%. Then between the first round and the second round, you have the influence of the fact that, number one, you don't have the parliamentary election, you just have the presidential election. That's what you're focusing. And what people are focusing on the fact that the parliament has the majority of the AK Party. I mean, the AK Party MHP, President Erdogan's coalition. And so the whole idea that the whole plan of the of Kılıçdaroğlu's alliance, if you want to call it that, which we'll talk about, was we're going to change the system. But of course, they couldn't change the system because they don't have a majority. Furthermore, the so-called coalition that they had, which was the Nations Alliance, was not really an alliance. I mean, in fact, it was merely a patchwork, not even well glued together, of a number of parties that really didn't stick together very much. They were not around. They were not campaigning for Kılıçdaroğlu. And then, most importantly, and I think this is really important, it was interesting because Kılıçdaroğlu's campaign, the second time around, to be very blunt about it, was, that the Syrian refugees would be expelled from the country. And I don't think President Erdogan ever said anything like that. He said he would like to help the Syrian refugees. He brought them in, almost 3.7+ million refugees. Who did that? Who brought in refugees like that? Only President Erdogan. And then he said that he's going to try to repatriate them. But the campaign of the Nations Alliance was very, very militant campaign and the posters all over the country where it basically said Syrian refugees are going to be kicked out. That was a real change, and maybe they thought that would be a winner, but it wasn't, I don't think. And so there were a lot of detriments and defaults in terms of the way the Nations Alliance operated. The People's Alliance stuck together and furthermore got a boost from Sinan Oğan. So I think that really, really helped to cement the victory that we saw today. And again, this is a significant victory. Because especially, and if you're looking in the West, there was no anticipation of this result. to be very candid.
But yeah,
And again, it goes back to what we talked about the last time. Is a lot of, I think, wishful thinking and listening to a lot of the analysis by many of the Western American commentators. Their analysis was not so much about the facts, but more about what they thought the result should be.
right.
And that, I don't think, was the way to approach it. I think the way to approach it is to understand that what do the Turkish people want? I mean, I am so impressed. I mean, I'm amazed to see a man being brought in a hospital bed to come and vote. I've never seen that in an American election. I saw a guy dressed as Spider-Man coming to vote in the elections. I saw people having, physical difficulty coming to vote, voting in the election. Voting for the Turkish people, I think, made an impression around the world. The Turkish people care about elections, and they really participate. Look at the numbers. Look at the turnout numbers. So all around, I think you see an election that was an affirmation for the Turkish participation in its political system. And the result is that I think that the one that the Turkish people wanted. And it's true that the Turkish people are divided, but frankly, the American people are divided too. And if you look around France, Germany, you name it, all over the world, you have division. But here, I think you have a clear victory.
And the one big, whilst there are differences and divisions in many countries, the one thing that certainly is true here is that the Turkish people are thoroughly engaged in their civic duty to vote. Amazing 85% votes. Now, obviously, the failures of the opposition campaign of Kemal Kılıçdaroğlu's campaign will be analysed and discussed at length, and whether it was actually him that lost the election as opposed to Erdogan winning it, although that's also was true. That will be analysed to bits over the coming days and weeks, I'm sure, and there'll be great question marks over Kemal Kılıçdaroğlu's future in politics even, which he should be asking himself at this moment. But the important thing, what do you think is the most important outcome of this election for both Turkey and for the world?
Well, I think the one factor here, and I think is important, is this question of leadership. And you do hear this a lot from the, in the polls, and people are talking in terms of why they voted. And I think that there was a feeling that, notwithstanding the problems that Turkey has, and they're formidable, that they felt that, that Erdogan had leadership traits, leadership qualities, and that Kılıçdaroğlu maybe didn't have them. And also, his ability to marshal a supportive coalition was not successful. The coalition wasn't effective, didn't give him much push. Yet at the other side, you did have a very energetic election. Just to say President Erdogan's point, his interesting point. Like he says, when he at the first time around, he said, "I was on the balcony, but my opponent was in the kitchen." Now, again, this is kind of, it almost sounds like a great Turkish proverb, but the point is, being out there and campaigning among the people, it resonated with the people, and that's that. And the people voted in high numbers, and they showed their support for that leadership going forward. And so now that is a very, very great task for President Erdogan to lead the nation on into the next couple of years and to deal with these formidable issues, and also the relationships with many of its bilateral and other partners and alliances or otherwise, to try to forge a great future for Turkey. Yeah, I mean, that is really one of the reasons I think that people voted for the Nations Alliance, and for the People's Alliance for President Erdogan, is because I think they were impressed by Turkey's role in the region, in the world, in terms of its significance, in terms of its influence. And that, I think, resonated a whole lot among the Turkish people. That they felt they counted in the world. They feel they counted in the world, that they were important in the world. And that is really important, I think, in the Turkish psyche and the Turkish culture. more so than a lot of these other issues that we read about, certainly in the West.
On that particular point, we've certainly seen President Erdogan standing up against NATO, and not standing up against NATO, but making a stance at NATO with regard to Finland's and Sweden's NATO membership, and allowing Finland to join, but Sweden having not fulfilled its promises, saying you've got to wait, folks. We've also seen standing up at the United Nations a couple of years ago, reminding them that there could be a fairer world. And more recently, perhaps last week, the grain deal, the importance of the role that Erdogan's had in the Russia-Ukraine conflict, and how he's working for a stable future for the whole world across the region as well. So these are obviously very important points.
Well, I think to take them all, really talk about them. First of all, the idea about the grain deal and all of that just shows again the capability of President Erdogan. I mean, and I think that even begrudgingly, his people who are detractors really have to agree that that was quite amazing. But on the other hand, he also was able to be a mediator. He's able to support Ukraine at the same time and doing all sorts of complicated policy moves in terms of Russia and so forth, some of which, I think Americans don't necessarily support. But as far as the grain, as far as the support of Ukraine, as far as supporting them with drones and helping them in their battle, is great. And I think if I read correctly, President Zelensky congratulated President Erdogan. Maybe I didn't read it correct. I read that among the many heads of state. Now, about the question about the UN, that's important. President Erdogan said the world is greater than five, and I think he made a very important point. I don't hear that point coming from China or Russia or anybody else. I hear it from Turkey. The fact that it doesn't make any sense that these five permanent members have all of the veto power to stop everything and stop action by the United Nations. It makes the United Nations really very ineffective. And the world is greater than five. I think that is a very important point. And I think the UN should take it very, very seriously. As far as NATO is concerned, and that is a very problematic area, I think, because going forward in terms of relationship between the United States and Turkey, look, Finland has been approved, but Sweden has not been approved. And clearly, it would be beneficial in terms of U.S.-Turkish relations and the war in Ukraine and a lot of other things, including F-16s, to have Turkey approve as a NATO member the accession of Sweden. And they had that agreement, they worked on it, and hopefully they will work it out. So now that the election is over, hopefully, and before the NATO summit in July, President Erdogan will be meeting with NATO partners and hopefully working out a solution to this problem, because it's very, very important in order to stop this war in Ukraine to have Sweden accede to NATO. Very, very important, significant of world impact dimensions. So, and I do think that, and I'm going to be optimistic about that one. So again, what we see in all of these is a participation of Turkey in a very active way in regional and global politics and affairs. And that is, I think, what resonates and will resonate very importantly to the Turkish people, in the sense that we are, we have an impact on the world. We have a say in how things go, especially in a region which is a very tough region. Let's be realistic. The region in which Turkey lives, the Turkish people live, is a very tough place with tough borders, tough border countries, Syria, Iran, you name it. Just big problems. So you do need to have a Turkey that is able to address and deal with these kind of very big problems. And I think that was also the factor that, maybe people thought that the leadership of President Erdogan is desirable. Even with all the problems in the region, even with all the domestic problems, that was a leadership thing. And that maybe Kılıçdaroğlu was not able to achieve that. That's kind of where I think the thinking is. I'm trying to figure it out.
One of the things on his balcony speech, On his balcony speech just a few minutes earlier, he was talking about trust and stability, and there's also another word I'd throw in there, which would be momentum. Both in terms of the international relations we've just been talking about, but also in terms of energy distribution, how Turkey is enabling energy to go out into Europe, which very desperately needs it at the moment, but also in terms of stability at home, in terms of putting the economy back on track, and after the COVID pandemic, after this war in Ukraine, which has knocked the economy across the world, including in the United States and all European countries, that now with the momentum that has been built up over the last years, moving towards a production economy, using the energy that it's creating here in Turkey, and focusing on producing for the future. These are the things he was touching on in his speech just now. You're a friend of Turkey. You know the country very well. You've seen it developing, I'm sure, over the last 20 years. How important do you see this momentum for continuing into the future?
I mean, it's really existential. I mean, it's significant. The economy needs to be addressed. I mean, no question about it. And that's I think one of the top issues that face President Erdogan going forward, starting immediately tomorrow. How to deal with the economy, how to shore up the economy. And that will be, and in terms of momentum, and there is momentum here. In other words, in the sense of having a ratification of his leadership to go forward and deal with it. As far as energy is concerned, I mean, to me, one of the big problems that Turkey has is its dependence on Russia for energy and on external energy, and it's got to be able to diversify its energy sources in order to reduce its dependence on Russian energy and so forth.
Which, of course, it's doing with the Black Sea
Yes.
gas and now the petrol being discovered, as well as renewables within Turkey.
Yes, and of course, having the nuclear power plant,
of course,
and having nuclear power will help a lot as well. So there are a lot of things that are being done to deal with that issue. But the question of how to address the problem of the economy and shore up the economy is number one in terms of post-election. And maybe, I mean, I think that when the Turkish people voted the way they did, they basically said, "I'm giving you my." Let's call it a power of attorney. I'm giving you my vote to tell you so you can go and have the momentum, as you put it, to go and deal with these issues. And, the question of how this is addressed and how, in terms of interest rates and the current account deficit and all of these really formidable problems. And these, by the way, are not new problems. These problems have been around for a long time, but they have become very, very, very significant, and they need to be addressed. As far as it's not just energy, but I think also it has to do with, regional cooperation, Turkey's position in NATO, its relationship with its neighbors. There are so many big issues that need to be addressed as well in terms of maintaining stability in that region, and that's very, very significant. And Syria is, of course, a very big issue, high on the agenda as well.
And in terms of developments at home, over the last 20 years, we've seen many improvements in transportation, in education, in health. How do you think Erdogan will take these forward?
Well, again, to me, I hate to be repetitive. It's got to deal with the economy, number one. But certainly, I mean, I've always heard Turks tell me about the health system and the healthcare system in Turkey and brag about it and say how very effective it is. Transportation, building bridges and infrastructure, of course, very, very important. So, and bringing to the middle class and to the trying to improve again the economy and the standard of living of the people is absolutely essential. And the earthquake, which we didn't talk about, which is to rehabilitate that area, and as promised to build homes for the people who are affected by this horrible catastrophe, is high also on the agenda for the president to be able to deal with that. And that was, again, I think, I'll call it a leap of faith, but it's more faith in the fact that that Erdogan would satisfy his promises on that to the people in the affected region, and he basically said that mistakes were made, and that was again, and then the people accepted that, and apparently, voted for him in large numbers. So his plate is enormously full with a series of domestic and internal issues, but also foreign issues, foreign affairs issues
Yes.
that are formidable, especially in a major power like this, a major country having faced an earthquake. I mean, that in itself is, it would have been a complete calamity. But again, addressing that, following up on the promises made on that, very important. Shoring up the economy, dealing with the interest rate issues, current account deficit, trying to improve the economy, and getting more foreign investment into Turkey is really important as well. And also improving, or let's say maintaining, the faith of foreign investors in Turkey and wanting to invest in Turkey, increasing trade, bilateral trade, multilateral trade with Turkey, very important. And I think it's doable, and it's all like a package of, again, related to leadership.
And this is one of the significant things, isn't it? The reasons behind improving relations and working so hard to improve international relations with such a diversity of countries from across we can say the Western developed countries down to Africa, South America, as well as Asian nations, to build relationships so that to build a future of trade possibilities. This and again, going back to the balcony speech, looking at investing in Turkey to build the future for the young people with through industry and export potential, production potential, which again comes back to the energy. Everything seems very tied together, doesn't it?
Well, it does, and I also think that Turkey needs to find its place in this very fraught international system that we have right now. In other words, we have a Ukraine war where Russia invaded Ukraine. We have a rising China, which is increasingly at odds with the United States. Going forward, I think is very important. And also Europe. Where does Turkey fit in the international system? Where is its place? I mean, from my point of view, its place should be with the West, with the United States, with Europe, with NATO, with the EU, and solidly on that side. But that remains to be seen. There was a lot of discussion during the campaign about Russia and the United States, and hopefully now that we're over that, we can kind of calm down and really focus on improving, in particular, the relationship between Turkey and the United States.
Here's a model for you I'm going to give you some homework, Mark. Plant a seed for you to develop. We talk about sides there, the West and the East, and Turkey is literally, not just figuratively, but also literally the bridge between East and West. We got three of them crossing the Bosphorus, literally joining two continents. So when we talk about the two sides there, here's your homework to think about. Is it necessary to just talk about two sides? Is it perhaps a new model that perhaps this is something Erdogan is thinking about, that Turkey is like the hub in the middle of a wheel with spokes going out, and there's a balance all the way around. There's the potential for Turkey to, which is what Erdogan seems to be working towards with his foreign policy, to creating a balance around the world so that with the world being greater than five, everybody has a part to play. It's not just about Turkey pushing itself forward. It's about how can we all work together to create a better world, to make the world a fairer place, to use the title of his book. That's something for you to ponder about and us to discuss another day. Is this a new model for the future? But all of this necessitates the people, the countries, do work together, that they respect each other. I think respect is another word which needs to be brought out. We've seen in the campaigns, and by campaigns perhaps I mean the Western media campaigns in this election have been very anti-Erdogan. There's been a very strong stance against him. Now, ironically, this might actually have given a tremendous boost to President Erdogan's campaign at home. It's all very well for, it might not be right, but it's the way things are done for these sort of attacks to be made. But isn't it time now for people to start looking at Turkey in a different way from how they were looking at it 20, 30 years ago, and to see the Turkey of 2023 and to respect where it's come to today?
Well, I think you make a really important point. I mean, this kind of regret, or we call it wishful thinking, whatever you want, it's already in the, I noticed something already on Twitter where some of the writers, writing The Economist and others, are now, lamenting this result and not really addressing it in terms of what it is. I mean, this is the vote of the Turkish people. And as you say, it'd probably be a good idea to take that and see how you work with that. How do you work with this result to make the relations better on all levels? But again, what you describe is not I call it a syndrome, or whatever you want to call it. It's not something that just occurred for this election.
No.
This is a long-standing thing that's been out there for a long time. And I mean, I say to those commentators, it's kind of always, again, the way you look at the glass of water is half empty or half full. And when they look at Turkey, the glass is always empty, not even half empty. It's always empty. And I think you make a very important point. Now, at the same token, these commentators are entitled to say whatever they want to say. I mean, that's fine. I let them say what they want to say. But I think that, understanding the result and seeing the way this election turned out should be taken at face value in what it is, and maybe fill the glass of water up a bit and say, okay, so now we're in day one after the election. Let's see where Turkey goes and what is it going to do. And again, and as far as the United States and the West, how can we be helpful in terms of your achieving, Turkey, your goals and your achievements? You certainly needed help after the earthquake, and the world turned around and said, we're going to help you. And that was great. So the same attitude, I think, should prevail, in terms of Turkey's issues and problems. And allies should be turning to Turkey and say, how do we help you? And how can we work with you? And how can we help you achieve your goals of stability and freedom and all those great things? And that should be the attitude. But again, I can't speak for, those who are the naysayers will be the naysayers, and they're not going to change their tone. At the same time, I think looking at Turkey in realistic fashion with its pluses and minuses is the right way to do it, in a fair way. It's okay, in my opinion, and I've always felt this way, to be critical, but in a fair fashion. And I think being fair about it, fair but critical. But I don't think that as far as I've heard in terms of some of the election commentary, has been quite, I think, critical, but not always fully fair, but again,
not
very
always,
much a predilection and a bias.
Yes, not always fully objective either. And this, as you say, the reality seems to be ignored, and the reality is that Turkey is a growing country. It has a different future from the one that it maybe had 30 years ago. It has hopes and expectations. It has a plan under President Erdogan's leadership. There is a vision for the century of Turkey. There is a goal for the future, and the perceptions of Turkey need to change for the world to fit in and catch up with the country?
Well, I do think that, the war in Ukraine needs to be solved and ended. I mean, that is really so essential for the world to move on. Europe, Turkey, everybody, because we're all stuck with that. And in terms of Russia's aggression in Ukraine, that has really put a damper on a lot of efforts to move forward on a lot of important things.
And yet, this is precisely one of the points, Mark, that one of the key players that has the potential to bring that to a close is Turkish President Recep Tayyip Erdogan. He is the one who is talking with Zelensky at one moment and with Putin at the other, and has brought their representatives together to discuss various aspects, including the grain deal. So Turkey's role in diplomacy is something which shouldn't be ignored, but should be respected and held up as an example for an opportunity to move forward together.
Well, I think even those who are critical begrudgingly would have to agree that what's been achieved here in terms of Ukraine by Turkey is very important and admirable, no question. Bringing the grain out, providing drones and support to Ukraine. As far as Turkey's policy towards Russia, I think that is not necessarily what I would be in favor of, but at the same time to be able to multitask in that fashion in order to have the result that we've seen, the grain deal and the Black Sea and all these things we talked about, is very, very important. I think that that really, it's interesting, I was thinking about it, because I think that as we go forward, Turkey as, if you will, I guess this is what we would say in America, we make lemonade out of lemons, in the sense that Turkey's relationship with Russia could be helpful in order to resolve this issue, and that's important because of that relationship. There could be a way to find an end to this war, because this war is really causing an interference in the ability of Europe and the world to function. And it also impacts America in terms of our politics and our resolve to support, to continue to, and also the European countries to continue to supply endless weaponry to Ukraine in the billions and billions of dollars. This does not go over well in the domestic political sphere. We have an election coming up in 2024. We have elections in Europe. At the same time, the Europeans understand this is an existential thing, because they've got to stop Russia at this point, or there's going to be further aggression. And it's a very bad situation. How do you solve this? I mean, Henry Kissinger just turned 100 on Saturday, and he was asked about Ukraine, and he came up with this idea that, gee whiz, they should sit down, I guess, and mediate it, and then work it out, but keep part of Crimea, giving back some land or whatever. There needs to be a solution to this, because this can't be an endless war. It's not going to fly. We have candidates in the United States like DeSantis who, call Ukraine a territorial dispute. I mean, it's absolutely ridiculous.
So many people like him don't understand the dynamics that are going on. But here we have Recep Tayyip Erdogan now re-elected as president of Turkey, who does, and one that it would well behoove the West, whether it's the EU, whether it's NATO, whether it's the United States, to recognise the alliances that already exist and to build on them to the future, in the way that the Turkish public have voted to continue his leadership into a third decade now. Mark, I want to thank you so much for joining us today. It was Sunday, the 28th of May, the 2023 presidential runoff elections, won by Turkish President Recep Tayyip Erdogan with 85% participation in a vote and 52.16% lead for the president. Kemal Kılıçdaroğlu falling behind there at 47.84%. So a momentous day here for us here in Turkey. Mark, I want to thank you so much for joining us. No doubt we'll be talking about many of those other details which we just were able to touch on this evening, and we'll come back to your homework another time.
Thank you very much for the homework assignment. All the best to you.
Thank you.